Hart, my friend, thanks for joining us.
It is.
Let's just dive right into it. Like, how do you get a name like Hart? And how do you deal with that growing up? Like, that's a lot of vulnerability there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can probably imagine kids were not kind considering how many things heart rhymes with. The first thing coming to mind.
No, I just gotta give it hit me right there.
Yeah, but I think other than my answer of my parents being Grateful Dead heads, I think I was named after like family history on the Hebrew side, actually, because I'm Jewish.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
But on the English side, my parents had no idea what to name me. So
Mm.
they had a friend who they liked who had the same Hebrew name. So they went with Hart. They liked it. And I think growing up, I was really self conscious about it quite a lot. But then, that turning point where like uniqueness becomes your
Yeah.
superpower. So probably like 15, 16 into my early 20s, it became a superpower. And now, I mean, I love it. It's unique. There's very few others out there. And at least I'm usually the only heart in the room, which is nice.
That's funny. Yeah, it's so hard to forget your name. Like it's known. Like it's. I heard your name once, retained it. That's it. It's in there.
Yeah, yeah,
How did
fair
you how
enough.
did you get started in real estate investing or even in the business or entrepreneurship? Because you're well known for Rent Panda, which is kind of revolutionizing property management in
Yep.
Ontario and Canada. Is it how far is it? How far is the reach?
Yeah. So, I mean, Rent Panda, it's also a funny name story because most people don't think of, Rent Panda as existing in the world of formal property management and leasing and real estate, which is,
Yeah.
you see a lot of dark blues. I come from an advertising background, which I'll get into, but
Okay.
you see a lot of formality and businessy things, and guardian and investing, and everything is suit and tie and button up. And we wanted to do the exact opposite with Rent
Yeah.
Panda. It was all about bringing comfort and approachability to the world of real estate and specifically in rentals. So it started, I was in advertising. I was in my 20s and working in advertising for agencies. So I was an account manager on General Motors and Tropicana and, actually the census. So we did a lot of government work. And my brother had moved up to Thunder Bay. My brother's my co-founder. He was a PhD in political science. So two people that had nothing to do with real estate at all.
Are they close in
And
age?
3 years, three
Okay.
years.
Yeah, that's close enough.
Yeah. But we spent the first, 15 years just beating the hell out of each other. And
I know.
my parents always say, how in the world
How did this
did you
end
run a
up?
business together? Yeah. But he moved up to Thunder Bay. He was finishing his PhD, moved up to Thunder Bay, and had a really really hard time finding a rental. He was a tenant at the time, as was I, and we were talking about his rental experience as a tenant, and I was experiencing very similar things in Toronto
Mm.
as a tenant. The nugget of the idea was actually from a website called Home Sweet Homes, which for yourself or anyone listening, if you Google it, it still does exist. And it's actually part of a lot of my presentations
Yeah.
because it was a website where you had to e-transfer the owner of the website $25. And when you e-transferred him $25, him or her, I'm not sure what it was, they would send you a Word document
Wait a
of all the
second.
listings.
Is this what? Is this like 97, 98? What year we're talking
This was 2015.
here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Okay.
it feels very, pre Y2K. It's like send someone some money, maybe drop a 20 in the mailbox, and they'll send you, a document with all the listings. But that was the way that people found rentals in Thunder Bay. It was the predominant listings
Hmm.
platform. And so we were talking about how crazy that was. And then I was talking about my experience on viewit.ca, which was, the pinnacle of the rental experience for 20 years in Toronto. And it was just really crappy.
Hmm.
It was an archaic system that hadn't been invested in. And so we had that moment of there's got to be a better way. And frankly, Renee, we started as a tech company. I went from the world of advertising with a political science, brother, and we both jumped into tech startup life, which we were completely out of our depths with. But we took that leap, and we built out a platform. We talked with tons and tons and tons of landlords.
What were the common problems you saw with landlords? What were they saying?
Yeah, so we actually stole from Airbnb's playbook very early on, and we offered free photography for anyone that listed on the website. It was a free listing on the website, so we were doing this all completely free, and we were able to go to people's houses and speak with landlords. So we actually got face to face with about 2,000 landlords as we started up the business.
Okay.
And we found that everyone at the time was just really struggling, still finding quality tenants, but filling vacancies quickly back in the day.
Yeah.
And we found that when you looked at tier 2 or tier 3 cities in Ontario, anything outside of Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver, essentially, there weren't really good systems beyond a marketplace, and even the marketplaces were quite bad for doing everything holistically on one platform. So we came up with the idea to just centralize it all and be able to list a property, message tenants, message applicants, book your showings, screen your tenants, build your leases, all on a single platform, which was typically software that was held for large-scale property management companies.
Yeah.
Buildium, Yardi existed, but nothing was
Those are big scales. So when it comes down to smaller cities, you get mom and pops, you get property management companies that have been around for like 30, 40 years or so.
Yeah.
It's a huge element of real estate investing.
Yeah, and it was a painful, time-consuming experience.
Yeah.
And then, we built that product. We started to push it out across Thunder Bay. Then we expanded down to Guelph, then Kitchener-Waterloo. And as of about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we expanded across the province.
Awesome.
But when we expanded across the province, we found, especially as we moved into the last 3 years of renting, more and more of these mom and pop landlords said, great software, I don't have time to do it myself, just find my tenants. So we actually said no for about 2 years to finding tenants, to doing leasing work. And then eventually we went, a lot of people are asking for this, we should probably try it out. So we started to do leasing work. And then, people said, great, you found my tenant, now manage my property. And we said no for another long while, because we did not want to be property managers. We wanted to be, tech startup founders. We wanted that hockey stick curve. We wanted to sell for, hundreds of millions. But we found that the service-based operation, the personal relationships, the helping of landlords build their portfolio by taking more and more off of their plate really became the bread and butter. And now we operate across Ontario. We've got leasing and property management teams across the entire province.
Amazing.
And, the software is still there, but we find that it's kind of the gateway drug into the Rent Panda experience. More and more people don't want to do it themselves. They don't want to be landlords. They want to be investors. So we position ourselves as the rental experts, or as I like to put it, the garbage men of the rental industry, because we're cleaning up all the stuff that other people don't want to deal with.
It's messy. No one really talks about it. It's messy. It's messy business at times. I understand completely.
I'm sure you understand more than most that it's a messy business.
It's a messy business at times. Not very sexy,
No.
So wait, I mean, this is quite. That's huge. Like you're operating like from Windsor all the way to Ottawa here, basically. Massive, like Thunder Bay all the way to Sudbury and Cornwall. How do you operate what are the challengings of operating a business that basically it's one time zone, luckily, but still there's a lot of people involved in this, I can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And really it's all about the right systems. And having gone through the world of advertising and digital advertising, and my brother writing a book, regardless of what.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur. It's all about systems and procedures, of course.
100%. And I think, right now we've got about 26 team members across the province. So fundamentally how it works is that we hire people regionally so that we can have leasing teams within each region in Ontario. And from a property management perspective, we have centralized systems that can handle the majority of inquiries that come through. So whether you're sending through a request for a fix for your leaky tap in Kingston or Thunder Bay or Niagara, it's no different. It's the same system. It's just what handyman, what plumber do you call, right?
You'll call a plumber in Thunder Bay for a fix in Peterborough.
Right. But, you can train a property manager on how to efficiently triage a work order in a much more efficient way. So we don't have to train
Mm.
26 individuals on how to triage a work order. We can train two people on how to triage a work order, and they just have a Rolodex of the qualified, verified trades that we stand behind. And so it's all about developing that system. But unfortunately, it takes a long time and a lot of effort to build those systems.
So what's your background with I mean, you started this I mean, what's your background with this? Because
Yeah.
that is quite intricate system, and well, few people think this way.
Yeah, to be honest, my background is in making mistakes. So it's
Okay.
it's a lot less about what I did. And people always say, what did you go to school for? And I said, I went to school for marketing, but it didn't help me at all in my marketing jobs. And
Mm.
my advertising experience had no basis for what I was doing now, other than, building the brand of Rent Panda. But ultimately, I think the value of working hard, being open to making mistakes and learning from those mistakes is
Ooh,
incredibly important.
that is huge. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people, I mean, most non-entrepreneurs do not want to make mistakes. It's so common. I mean, some
Yeah.
people take it so harshly when they make a mistake. I remember when I first started off making a mistake, I'd be so hard on myself just for making a mistake. But that's the way we learn.
Yeah. And I think the reality is, the background that has helped me a lot was actually um, when we first started Rent Panda, we built a tech product. And then we realized this tech product that we spent a lot of money on is essentially worthless. For all intents and purposes,
Mm,
it doesn't make us any money today. It's
okay.
just a free tool that's out there that some people use. But being able to pivot, and whether it's a major pivot or a minor pivot, the learning of we're going to take this huge investment and just park it on the side, right? It wasn't pure trash, but just park it
Mm,
on the side. It took a lot of effort to shed that ego, to shed that, it's a sunk cost essentially, but to
yeah.
shed the notion of like, maybe we can make it work. Maybe if we just push harder, maybe we can try harder. Maybe we can put brute force energy into just making it work, and realizing that, ultimately it's a product that no one wants to buy. And so you can't force
It's,
fit demand for a product.
so
So
how
you
does
just
one
pivot.
develop? This is great, Hart. What you're telling I love speaking with you because you've got such optimism and enthusiasm. Where do you pick up this? How did you develop this attitude towards entrepreneurship?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. I think it's something that you learn over time from a lot of different people.
Mm,
And something that I'll say to this day is I'm always looking for mentorship, even though I've had many mentors, whether formal or informal, throughout my career,
mhm.
because there's never going to be a place to learn or someone to learn from that is the be all end all. I think as you move through life, you find those people, you find your tribe, and that tribe may have a leader
Yeah.
and your tribe may shift, right? You may go on this nomadic
Mm,
journey and realize, holy crap, I am somewhere completely different than I was 2 years ago, and I need to make that minor pivot. And so from, my dad is an entrepreneur, but I wouldn't say I've learned everything from him. My first boss was an entrepreneur, but I didn't learn everything from him.
yeah.
But I've learned things from people along the way. But ultimately, I think the biggest attitude is not having an ego and being able to learn from anyone in any facility. And
Being
I
being
think,
humble.
yeah, for sure. And acknowledging that, if it's cliche, but if you're the smartest person in the room,
Yeah,
you're in the wrong room.
that's
And
true.
so, those who surround themselves with people who, are not as experienced as them, or less, intelligent than them, or just less experienced in a certain discipline, you're never going to grow in that way. And so just pushing that boundary and stepping outside of that comfort zone, that's what I think is great. And I also think that, like, maybe an element of my personality is a bit of a glutton for punishment. And that's the case in business and in personal life.
Okay.
But I think just willing to endure pain. I
Ah.
can go down a complete
Oh
tangent
man,
on this
that
one,
that's
but yeah,
huge. That's huge because a lot of people don't want to go through those doors. It's too
yeah,
much for them.
yeah. And I think, I listened to this YouTuber Ross Edgley, and he's a ultra endurance athlete. And he says that everything in today's day and age is meant to make us more comfortable.
Yes.
Everyone is trying to make more money, buy the next thing that will make you more comfortable. Preheat your car before you go out,
Uh,
heated driveway so you don't have to shovel anymore. And the more comfortable we get with the world around us, the more we seek comfort. And I think
Yeah.
seeking discomfort is really important. And whether it's, the new trend of cold plunges or
Hmm.
climbing a mountain for
No,
17 days straight to just, feel that pain.
you did that. You did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
and I think, you also meet really, really good people in situations where you are undergoing pain because you
Yeah.
find like-minded people
Yeah.
who are just willing to go through it to experience something. And that's where, like, 8 years into a startup where the numbers show we should have failed 15 times by now, a little bit of it is just, let me suffer one more day and see what this has for me.
This is amazing. I love hearing this because one thing to add to what you're saying is everyone wants to grow mentally, emotionally, or potentially financially,
Mhm.
but it involves the uncomfortable. You need to be
Yep.
uncomfortable to grow. It goes hand in hand. And if one is not willing to be comfortable with the uncomfortable or the painful situation, as you mentioned, there's no growth.
Yep. For sure.
So I'm with you, my friend. I love that idea. So, but what motivates you on a regular basis? Like, what keeps you going? Because obviously, you're comfortable with pain. Do ice cold baths? Are you there yet? Or are you just climbing mountains?
No, no, no. Yeah, I like the cold in general. So yeah, I last weekend went swimming in Lake Muskoka, twice a day, every
Awesome.
day for the weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's good. It sets your mind right. It gives you that moment of clarity. But ultimately, what motivates me, regardless of what I'm doing, is really building something.
Mm,
And that's why, if Rent Panda failed tomorrow, I wouldn't be sad about the journey. I think I've grown immensely from it. But ultimately, I'm on a mission to build something that people enjoy, benefit from, makes their lives better, maybe not more comfortable, hopefully a little bit, but makes their lives better. And ultimately, as a company, we believe at Rent Panda that everyone can be a landlord. And there's a lot of people that want to be investors, but ultimately, we're still in this market where there's a housing shortage. It's not going to be rectified anytime soon.
hmm.
And I think the easier we make it for people to be landlords by providing high quality services, the better off we'll be. And I think Canada and Ontario specifically has been lacking that for a very long time. And so it's less so the mission of, enabling everyone to be a landlord that motivates me every day, because sometimes there are hard days and sometimes there are days with a lot more suffering. But ultimately, if I believe every morning that I'm on a mission to build something that people um, cherish, that people enjoy, that people value, then that for me is worthwhile. And I think it's the
You
case
know,
with any business.
I get the impression your name suits you well.
Yeah, I won't
Who
fall into
speaks
the
this way? Who speaks this way? Few people, very few people.
fair, fair. Some would say I'm just a millennial trying to keep everyone happy, and but I think it's important. I think it's where you find that tribe because we connected, we seem to hit it off right away. But I think you're also a person that cares innately about other people, that cares about their experiences, that actually finds value in things that they find value in. You find joy in things that they find joy in. So being able to play off of other people, I think, is intrinsically built into some people.
Yes,
And that's what draws those people together to build
exactly.
cool
It's
things.
surprising how some people mesh very well. Like you just, I don't know, vibration of some sort. They just kind of mesh.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you meet. It's like, yeah, it's like you've known each other for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the reason why we sat at many tables together many times,
Yeah.
just happy to be there. So you're talking about this housing crisis. Thank you for the compliments as well. But the housing crisis, which I find very fascinating because
Yeah.
like the news mentions it occasionally, but this has been going on for years. How do you see it and then it going in the next year and the
Yep.
following years? Like, it doesn't seem like we're getting out of it. For example, like Kingston's been the vacancy rate in Kingston's been like hovering around one
Right.
for the past 5, 6, 8 years or so. And it's not changing, even though they're building, it's not changing all that much. How do you see moving forward with this housing crisis, the
Yeah,
rental
for
market? How
sure.
do you see the rental market coming along?
So there's a lot to unpack, to be honest, because the first thing I'll say is that the generalized media reported data is is not biased, but it's skewed.
Yeah.
So when the census reports on vacancy rates, or when CMHC reports on vacancy rates, they are taking a subset of the rental market, and typically purpose-built rentals of 4 units or more.
It's easier. It's easier to work. They get the data. They call a couple of
Right,
people. They get all the
right.
data right there. It makes sense.
And the landlord with a basement unit that's maybe unregistered, that's maybe not legal, isn't going to be reporting that they've got
No,
4 people living in their basement.
that's true.
But what that does is it underreports on a very large segment of the market. And so when we were doing our initial research into developing Rent Panda, we actually found that 68% of all rental housing in Canada was provided by small landlords. And these are landlords that are defined as not having purpose-built rental units of 4 units or more.
So someone like a duplex.
Yeah, standard duplex,
Really?
that's not calculated. A
68%.
standard 68%. Yeah.
It's huge.
So the majority of the rental market is actually not being calculated by CMHC. And one can argue that that's not the case in Toronto, which may be true because there's a lot more purpose-built rentals in a city like Toronto or Ottawa. But when you get into tier 2 markets, and it's not a bad thing that you're a tier 2 market. Kingston, Thunder Bay, where we started, all of these markets are even more so heavily underreported when it comes to that type of housing. So there's new data sets that are coming out from private entities, and we've actually partnered with one at Door Insight. And I just ran the numbers right before this call. So the true vacancy rates for single family homes, duplexes, and triplexes in Kingston is hovering between 4.5 and 6.9%. So right off the bat, the 1% vacancy rate that the media is reporting on, because the media is typically biased towards Toronto, is just not true at all. And it's quite heavily skewed. But the reality is there's still lots of people clamoring for every single rental that you post.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is the quality of renter, and I hate using that term, but the fit essentially of that tenant to the properties that are being offered is fundamentally, there's a gap fundamentally. And so what we're seeing is there's a missing middle. There's a missing middle of properties that are affordable for, single income families, for typical blue collar hardworking families, for young professionals who have just entered into the rental market, for international students, for students in general. And so that missing middle is really key to what we're going to be seeing over the next few years, because that missing middle is growing. And what we've seen over the past couple of years is money was cheap. Investors were buying, investors were investing top dollars in their rental units to quote unquote attract the best tenants. And it's those quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances and, beautiful flooring and all the amenities. And, not every unit needs a dishwasher, not every unit needs quartz countertops. And so all of those upgrades have led to a saturation of the top end of the rental market. The typical duplex conversion where the basement has nicer countertops than my kitchen.
Yeah.
Those types of units are sitting longer and longer, and the fit of a quality tenant for those units is becoming more and more scarce. And so that's what we're seeing now, and that what we would expect for at least Q1 and Q2 of next year.
And so you're saying that the vacancy rate, especially in Kingston, is actually higher than what they're saying, because they're not taking into account all the duplexes or the mom and pops, little basements and all that.
Exactly. So they're not taking into account single family home rentals, well, any unregistered rental essentially, and then also single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, basement rentals. Because when you look at CMHC, like, have you ever gotten a CMHC pollster calling you up, right? Like, I haven't. I'm a mom and pop landlord, but no one from CMHC.
I got one call once. That's it.
Okay. Call, you own more properties than most of us. But I think that's where, the style of data collection is just more conducive to going to large buildings and collecting that data. So the data is going to be skewed. And then when you look at cities like Cornwall or Brockville or Hanover, or even, Sault Ste. Marie.
I know where all these cities are located, just because I know Ontario well, but Hanover, it's a small little town. Yeah, that's small.
Yeah. And, Belleville is hot now, but Belleville 5 years ago was essentially unreported. And
Mm,
Picton and Thorold and Trenton, all of these towns that are now substantial rental markets are not being reported in the same way. But
mm,
then when investors get into the market, they're still buying under these preconceived notions of incredibly low vacancy rates
mm,
and incredibly high prices, because that's
mm.
what's being reported. So that missing middle is really important. If I were to put my money anywhere, it would be on building or converting, middle of the road rentals, laminate countertops, no
Yeah.
dishwashers, coin laundry, shared coin laundry in the basement, because I will be able to charge less. I will come in at, market rent or just under market rent
Mm.
and find good quality, tenants who are going to stay 2, 3, 4 years and be able to turn over those units. But I think the
Well
housing
put. That is
crisis,
very smart because few people think that way. That's very brilliant. What kind of tenants do you find that are looking for properties at the moment?
everyone. I mean,
Everyone.
everyone is looking. Actually, we're December 5th. We're talking. Not everyone is looking because this is the worst time of the year to rent.
Yes.
But that being said, November, October, November are usually slow. December is incredibly slow in the last 2 weeks, but there's actually a little influx of volume that comes through early December because it's people that are looking for January or February,
Mhm.
and then the market will turn around. But in terms of who's looking, the volume that we see is from the middle of the road, middle income renter. It's these people that haven't been able to find housing beforehand are now forced to leave because landlords are selling, landlords are moving back in, landlords, maybe are kicking them out illegally, and they're trying to do whatever they can to boost the rents because the cost of everything has gone up for everyone. So these tenants are now moving. But that being said, we're seeing massive increases in international students, in
Massive.
student housing in
Huge.
general. Yeah, and if
It's
you look
it's
at,
it's changed the name of students anymore. Like people say,
yeah,
I'm into student rentals. Yeah, student rentals. It's more like international student rentals because
for
that's
sure.
that's that's what we're seeing, tons and tons of it.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with this influx? Because some people weren't too fond of it initially, but how do you
Yeah.
how do you deal with like having two, three people per room or something?
Yeah. Well, as an entrepreneur and as an investor, I buy properties that are specific to international students. So I think at the last event that we were at together, I had just closed on a 4 bedroom home that we're turning into an international student rental. But I
Tell me
think,
more about that. That sounds really interesting because a lot of people shy away from that.
mhm,
And the thing I like about you, Hart, is that you not only have your finger on the pulse of it, but you're seeing it from a on provincial
right.
wide range, and you know what works and what the demands is for the rental market. There's nobody else that's so knowledgeable with the rental market than you. So how is that changing your investing style?
Yeah, I mean, it has pushed me much deeper into the world of investing at a time where a lot of people are running away.
Hmm.
But I think, what we're seeing from an international student demand perspective is astronomical. If a lot of people are reporting on it. I think Daniel Folk did a great piece on, universities as businesses essentially, and
Yes.
looking at universities that lost money through COVID are now trying to increase revenues. And the best way to increase revenues is to bring in those who are paying the most. And international students typically pay 3 to 5 times what a domestic student pays. So from a
What number
revenue
is that? What
perspective,
number is that? Can you give us a number on that? What is that
I
like
mean, I'm not sure.
12,000, 12, 15,000? I think for
Yeah, for
college, is
sure.
it?
I mean, when I went to school, it was, $3,500, $4,000 a year for tuition.
Yeah,
So do 3 to 5 times that is probably what people are paying, plus inflation over the last lots of years since I've been in
that's
university.
insane.
But the the people who are coming over to study, typically a lot of young Indian students are coming over with enough money to study, right? They're paying
Mhm.
more than everyone else.
Yep.
They are working their butt off. They're hardworking young individuals
30,
who,
40 hours a week plus
yep,
school.
exactly.
Insane.
Yeah, and they're commuting. They're not buying cars to drive into
Yeah.
school. They're commuting on buses. They're working jobs, and like you said, they are fitting more people in because saving 50% on rent per person is totally fine when culturally and just financially it makes
Mhm.
sense to put two people in a room. In Thunder Bay, as an example, we actually talked to the head of the student union, and they were finding that more and more Indian international students were actually bed sharing. So not just two people in a room, but two people to a bed
Bed.
on 12-hour shifts. Because if one guy's working, nights at Pizza, and the
Yeah.
other one is working days as a research assistant at the university, then I don't need a bed for 12 hours of the day.
Wow.
I can share it. And now my
Wow.
rent is $100. And that's within a room where there's already multiple beds.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
So,
spoken to somebody who he was living in a three, maybe six bedroom. There were 12 people in one kitchen.
yeah,
And they're like, I
yeah,
got to get out. There's just too many people. Plus, there was five other friends coming in.
right, right.
It's just insane. And I'm also told that a lot of these, the way it works with the government for immigration, the loans that they actually get, they have to give what $10,000 to the
Yep.
government to get in. Some of those are loans. A large majority there are loans, so they got to pay those back as well, plus interest.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
Yeah.
money coming out. Yeah.
And I think that's where an understanding of the demographic is really important. And whether you're renting to young professionals or retired seniors or international students, understanding your market is really key. Understanding your client, your customer.
Yes.
This comes from my world of advertising, where if you don't know who you're advertising to, you're lost. And international students, especially in tier 2 markets, are presenting unique clients, as unique clients to the base of people who have those, products to sell, which are landlords. Because you typically have an older school mindset landlord in these towns and cities who are uncomfortable renting to people that have cultural differences. And so one thing that we're doing with our investment property, and it may sound stupid, but we're turning the bathrooms into wet rooms, because culturally, there is a room and it's all tiled and you can get the whole room wet, right?
Yes.
There's no shower curtain per se. There's bidets, like handheld bidets. And so water retention within a bathtub is not really a cultural norm. So instead of us placing international students in a typical bathroom and having water damage or mold within the first, 3-4 years, we're building a wet room with a central drain to understand that
That's
the cultural
awesome.
differences is there.
That's
And so
awesome.
it's just understanding the market, right?
So this caters to international students from India, or what background? Like, okay,
Yeah, typically
that's amazing.
Indian international students, and we've built it because we talked to the universities and the colleges, and a third of their full incoming cohort, not just international student cohort, but a third of the full cohort was international students from India. So if that's the case, we go, okay, well, over the next 3 years, the demand is likely there for this cohort. So let's build that housing.
What does this wet room look like? Is it just a hole?
No, so just imagine your bathroom.
Yeah.
But instead of a drain, yeah, so imagine the whole thing is tiled. Imagine like a walk-in shower, or even a shower that's like has a lip, or a bathtub, but there's a drain, a central drain, and the entire bathroom is sloped, just like you would slope a shower towards a central drain. You slope the entire bathroom towards a central drain, so that if at any point in time there's water, it gets drained. And you've got full encompassing tile, you've got full waterproofing underneath that tile. And it's just, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's a different mindset for building a bathroom.
You're catering to, as you say, you're catering to your target audience or your target market, which makes sense. And you, in the end, you'll probably save a lot more because you're not going to get damaged. I mean, I can only imagine that the water you're spilling everywhere.
Yeah, and it's the little things, right? So also an understanding of international student living is really important. A big living room where you can hold parties and have all your friends over, not only is not conducive to the lifestyle that these students are living, but it's not conducive to the lifestyle that we want to promote if they're living in our housing. Yeah. So making bigger rooms that have space for a desk, that have space for a TV, maybe even outfitting it with the TV on the wall, giving people personal living space where they can come home from school and working an 8-hour shift and just do their homework and go to bed and be, on their own in a living space is important. Yes, there's a little living room, but we don't need a big living room and dining room and huge kitchen and collective space. Yeah. We did our own research for this market. We did a piece of primary research for the university and college to understand the needs of this international student demographic. So
That's
it's all of these
fascinating.
little things where, you got to understand your market, you have to understand your customer, and then you can build in that way. But to your point, we also based it on a lot of experiences from our landlord clientele. So
Yeah.
we had enough landlords who were either in student rentals or, very, very much so avoiding student rentals to learn, what to do, what not to do, and why they're avoiding it. And we could dive full force
I
into it.
was I was one of those I mean the idea like even a year ago the idea of having two people per room, like having four people in a two bedroom, I was like, no, we don't allow that.
Right.
Now like that's the demand is there, and so
Yep.
we're giving into the demand.
Yep.
What do you suggest? Like, what are the top tips you would provide to a real estate investor moving on to the next year? Like, give us 5 tips because I love your perspective on it. Not only your perspective, but you love the research. So give us what you would do and what you
Yeah,
suggest others people do in the coming year.
for sure. So
Where to invest, but also what to invest and how to invest it.
yeah, so I'll do a bit of a cop out for a couple of those because you pegged me to five, but
Yeah.
I think ultimately investing in yourself as an investor and as a landlord is the number one. It has to always be the
Yeah.
number one. There are too many people that we see on a daily basis who have jumped into the world of investing and have no idea what they're doing, but also are
Mm,
not willing to learn. They
mm,
think it's passive income. They think they can just buy a property, put tenants in it, and they're going to be rolling in dough. And so there's so many lessons. There's thousands of books out there. There's people like yourself
yeah.
and many others to learn from. So educating yourself as an investor, whether you're a reader or a networker or someone who needs to hire a mentor or a coaching
Mm.
program, educate yourself before getting started or as soon as you dip your toe in,
Well
because
put. Well
there are
put.
so
That's
many mistakes to avoid that
I
lead
do
you down.
notice. I see so many novices who have no idea. It's
Yeah.
surprising they're even getting into the business.
Right. And being a novice is fine, but acknowledge that you're a
Yeah,
novice and get
yeah,
the education that's needed.
yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is what I just mentioned beforehand, but understanding your customer. And
Mm,
so once you've educated yourself, once you know what it is to be a real estate investor, you also need to know who you are, right? Are you a student rental investor?
mm,
Are you someone that only wants to build top tier housing? Do you want to build affordable housing? Do you want to build middle of the road housing?
yeah.
What type of investor are you? And that will also dictate, do you hire leasing out? Do you do it all yourself? Do you
Mm,
hire property management? What does that world look like for you? So you need to identify who your customer is, and in doing so, who you are as an investor. So that would be number two. Number three will be that missing middle. And I don't want to give away my investing secret as an investor, but the
the
missing middle,
niche, the niche.
yeah, that
Yeah.
niche is going to widen and grow. And if you talk to a lot of economists in the space and analysts in the space, and even those who are experienced, that missing middle is a segment that is only going to grow as that housing, affordability issue keeps growing, as the housing crisis keeps growing. That middle of the road tenant, that
Mm,
applicant, is going to be left out in the dark. So housing them is a massive, massive opportunity. Number four, I would say, is choose your market wisely. So a lot of people will just bounce around because they hear that other people have invested somewhere and it's
yeah.
good, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's investing in Sudbury as a trend or dropping down into Welland or going out to Hanover,
Mm,
those are trends that we see that are led by people who are well educated in terms of real estate investing, know who they are, know what is happening, but they're often followed by a lot of people who just do it blindly. Oh, Renee's investing in X. I'm going
yeah.
to invest there too. I'm going to throw
Yeah.
my money there,
Yeah.
which may be an okay strategy at first,
I,
but you
I, I
need to
have
know what you're
s-
doing.
I have seen markets that get saturated, and
Right.
it's not pretty because all of a
Right.
sudden there's a lot of units that are just staying vacant, or they dip the price and then the numbers don't work anymore. It happens.
Exactly.
It happens.
And so I think choosing a market and really, really understanding it. I would say there's a lot of data out there and there's a lot of data missing out there.
Hmm.
And knowing where those holes are, really understanding that customer in that market, because it varies. And even, looking at those Kingston numbers, if you look at the vacancy rates in the middle of Kingston versus the outskirts and east versus west, it
Huge
actually
difference.
varies. Huge
Huge
difference.
difference. Oh
Right.
yeah.
And we have people every day that come to us and say, I bought this 3 bedroom family home in Hamilton and it should have been, doing beautifully. Why is it only attracting bad
Hmm.
tenants? And it's like, well, it's in a really, really bad area. So,
Yeah.
maybe it would attract as a 1 bedroom or as a 2 bedroom, but no families with young children live in this area. It just doesn't happen. So understanding your market. And then the fifth one, not particular, actually not applicable at all to international students, but is just screen, screen, screen. Every single day, probably 10 times a day, we see people who have made mistakes screening tenants.
We can
And
do a whole podcast on just that.
yeah,
That's
and I
huge.
have.
Yeah.
It is massive. I will say, in short, there are tons of digital tools out there to make screening accessible. You need to be willing to invest in screening. It's not going to be done for free. There's a crazy stat that we pulled just based on the properties that we were leasing, and we saw 6% of all applications that we received, and we do now about 100 leases a month, were fraudulent, contained fraudulent information.
6%.
6% of all
it's just fake.
Yeah, completely fake. And there are companies out there that will fake documents for you now. So it is incredibly important to use the digital tools that are out there to have, stewardship from someone who's done it before.
Is this increasing?
Very much so.
Very
much so. So that's where, looking out to next year, essentially as prices go up and affordability goes down, desperation goes up.
Yeah.
And so tenants are willing to pay $1,000 to have fraudulent pay stubs, fraudulent employment letters, fake websites for fake companies built in order to fake employment. And it's not that necessarily these tenants are, the quote unquote professional tenants who are just going to move in and stop paying rent. We've seen legitimate people try and fake employment letters because, they just got a job and they're on probation, and that was enough for them not to get approved for the last 4 apartments they've applied to.
Yeah.
So the level of desperation is going up, and that's going to keep happening as rent prices go up and vacancy rates come down. Even though vacancy rates are higher than that 1%, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But so it's really important for investors to protect themselves. And thankfully, this isn't 1992. This isn't even 2015, 2016 when we started. Like right now, there are tons of tools. There's more than a dozen tools we could rifle off that can help a landlord screen their tenants. So there's no reason not to invest in them.
So Hart, anyone looking for getting good property management, how can they reach you?
Yeah, just go to rentpanda.ca. There's a bunch of sign up buttons if you want the software, if you want property management, if you just want tenant placement, if you need paralegal help, if you need coaching help, if you need education help.
It's all there.
It all. Or just shoot me an email at Hart, it's HART, at rentpanda.ca. I'm always happy to chat with anyone who reaches out.
Awesome. Hart, you're a great guy. One more last question.
Yeah.
How's the baby doing?
The baby is doing well. The baby has popped his first 2 teeth. He is happy as can be, and he's a lot of fun. It's a fun job being a dad.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. As a dad myself, it is. I remember those lovely moments, early moments. Well, enjoy very much. Thank you very much for taking the time. You're very knowledgeable, and the research, I love it. I think you're going to do very well. You've already done so well as well. So thank you very much, Hart.
My pleasure. It's always good to chat.
All right. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.